must do. I used to think God was the sun, God is the sun, but God's so much more than the earth and the stars are all of creation. God is creator, all in all, needing us to shine His light as you so use me. Oh God, I stand for you, and here I'll abide as you show me all that I must do. Command my hands, what must they do? Command my life, it's here for you. God is the love that heals all creation. God is creator, makes all things new. And God needs us to shine His light as me, as you so use me. Oh God, I stand for you, and here I'll abide as you show me all that I must do. And God needs us to shine its light, and God needs us to shine its light, and God needs us to shine its light as me, as you so use me. Oh God, I stand for you, and here I'll abide as you show me all that I must do. Show me all that I must do. Show me all that I must do.
Grateful that you are here watching with us this morning. And today we are celebrating Recovery Month here at Unity Church of the Hills. Our founding ministers, Ron and Lenore Scott, brought us a cornerstone of recovery from their work with the legendary Reverend Jack Bolin in Michigan. And here in our church, on any given week prior to COVID, you could pick and choose from almost a dozen recovery groups to attend. And our speaker today and board president Frank Phelan and I are both in recovery. And we're here to celebrate alongside all of our other friends in recovery, anonymous or not, this morning. We are all grateful for a spiritual community based in principles that honor a personal relationship with God of our understanding, and we delight in sharing with you today how those tools and unity powers and principles can work to support everyone in an experience of flourishing. Now, if you haven't had a chance to receive affirmative prayer from one of our praying chaplains, please call 512-814-5365 and leave a message with your name, phone number, and request, and a chaplain will call you back after service. Our children, youth, and angels and teachers continue to meet in virtual formats like Facebook groups and Zoom, and we just want to take a moment right now and focus our hearts on all of them and behold the Christ that they are. Our vision statement will appear on your screen in a moment, and I would invite you to speak it loud, affirming the truth of who we are called to be in the world. Together, we are an ever-expanding community of love and acceptance where lives are transformed. And if you are joining us for the first time today, welcome. Unity is a positive path for spiritual living that honors all paths to God, and wherever you are on that spiritual path, we honor and meet you there. Thank you for being with us this morning. And if you want to know more about us, just type the word connect in the comments, and an ambassador will reach out to you. And now, before we move into prayer, I can't think of a better day than a recovery celebration Sunday than to see this guy and say hello.
Hello, Unity Church of the Hills. Well, hey, it's been about 3 weeks since I caught this pneumonia bug. I'm doing a lot better, gaining a little bit of weight back, a little bit of strength. So sorry I have not been able to be there with you, and so sorry I'm not going to be able to finish this interim term. I so fell in love with UCOH while I was there those 6 weeks. Everyone I met, the staff, the board of trustees, some of the congregants, and I was so looking forward to being there when we all got together again. But now it is going to have to be on my passing through from Colorado to Florida. We are returning to Colorado on Friday, August 28th. My son is flying in to help the drive back, and look forward to seeing you when we can all be together. I know that great things are coming for Unity Church of the Hills, so hang in there. You're doing a great job. Your staff is fabulous. Speakers are great, and I know great things are on the way. I love you all. We'll see you on a visit. Take care. Many blessings.
Thank you, Dr. Raz, and we miss you already. And with that, let's move into prayer. As we center in on the truth of our being, moving that 12 inches from our head to our hearts, centering on the power and the presence of God, and God expressing as us, there is nothing but God here. There's nothing but the presence of love here. There is nothing but light here, and we are grateful for this opportunity to commune together, to be with one another, and shine our light on each other and in the world. We hold in this light any unrest that is occurring in our world. We hold in this light those who may have been affected by Hurricane Laura. We hold in this light anyone who's experiencing discomfort or illness, whether it is physical or otherwise due to COVID or coronavirus. We'd hold all that in the light, knowing, again, that there is nothing but God here, and that truth is pervasive. And we can count on this light and this love to heal and bring wholeness to one another and our planet. And we simply let that be, knowing that it is so in the name and the nature of the Christ Spirit within us all. And so it is. Amen.
Before we jump into this morning's announcement, we wanted to let you guys know who won the harvest drawing. And I've asked Hank to make that announcement. So Hank, let us know who won.
It's Mara Rafis.
Maura Rafis, congratulations, Maura Rafis. So Melissa Larson will be getting a hold of you and will let you know that you've won the harvest drawing. And at least we know Roderick is laughing. Hopefully all of you are as well. We wanted to just have a little bit of fun before we jump into the announcements. Congratulations, Maura. So now, as we jump into the announcements, we have shifted the focus for our Sharing is Caring campaign this Sunday and next Sunday to the relief efforts from Hurricane Laura. So for every share of the message while we are live, we're actually going to donate $10 towards the relief efforts. If you haven't already, please take a moment to share today's message. Our Fall Spirit Circles series begins next week, September 13th. Groups all around Central Texas will be exploring the topic of community and belonging as they create a larger sense of community through connection. Registration is now open, and you can find circles to join by visiting our website, unityhills.org. Conscious Conversations facilitators John Fleming, Joni Lorraine, and Robin Llewellyn continue to shine light on the events we're experiencing right now. And this month, they'll be exploring and demystifying policing and police reform. The three will be engaging in ideas that support participants in recognizing and releasing their own barriers to peace around this topic. Join them on Thursday, September 3rd, via Zoom at 7 p.m. You will need to register in advance at unityhills.org. Starting in September, Real-Time Parenting is changing the time for their Zoom meetings to Sunday evenings on first and third Sundays at 8:30 p.m. This will enable parents of younger children to focus on the conversation at hand after they've put their little ones to bed. The Zoom link will continue to be made available in the YFM News and in the private Facebook groups. We Wisdom is reopening on Tuesday, September 8th. The preschool uses a blend of both Montessori and traditional child development approaches to ensure that each child's needs are met in a loving, supportive spiritual environment. There are still a few openings for new students. Please contact Director Carrie Monk if you're interested in enrolling, taking a tour, or have any questions. The 27th Annual World Day of Prayer takes place on September 9th and 10th and focuses on the theme, From Fear to Faith. There are several ways to participate. First, beginning on Sunday, September 6th, we will have a Dissolving Your Fear station that will be set up outside of the chapel. You're invited to come by the church at your convenience to take part in the ritual, and perhaps while you're here, take a God walk on the campus. Second, we're hosting a watch party on our Facebook page on Wednesday, September 9th at 7 p.m., where we can all tune in together as a Unity family to watch Unity Worldwide Ministries kickoff service. Continue to tune into Facebook hourly beginning at 8 p.m. on Wednesday night as chaplains, LUTs, and our laity share affirmative prayers and words of inspiration. Finally, at 7 p.m. on Thursday night, you are invited to join us for a final hour of World Day of Prayer via live stream. And this special service will feature crystal bowls by Paul Hubbard, an inspiring message by Rick Busby, and a final Dissolving Your Fear ritual. All are invited to participate. In addition to supporting our congregation and moving forward positively and productively, Dr. Roger Teal's Bridges to Breakthrough webinar will equip each of us with tools to work masterfully with change and to mine the gifts from any situation as we open the way for thriving. Join your Unity Church of the Hills family on Sunday, September 13th from 2 to 4:30 p.m. as Dr. Teal takes us from Bridges to Breakthrough. Please register in advance at unityhills.org. Now, if you have been hungering to meet in person and see your beloved fellow UCOH congregants, you'll be happy to know that we are scheduling small groups of up to 10 people to meet outdoors on the campus, on the pavilion or the patio, or in the labyrinth or meditation garden. Contact Audrey Simpson at 512-335-4449 or audrey.simpson@unityhills.org to reserve your spot and to learn about the safety protocols involved. And so now I would invite you to go ahead and settle in, quiet your mind as we move into a more contemplative place of meditation. And as you close your outer eyes, become aware that you are aware. Notice the gentle rise and fall of breath in and out. Breathing in and letting go. Notice the space behind your eyes as you feel your body in the chair or sofa, or perhaps lying in bed. Eckhart Tolle reminds us that the core delusion is the loss of now. The loss of now is the loss of beingness itself. And so for this moment, we can give ourselves to the present moment, because it is where we find our access point or portal into the presence of God. And if thoughts arise, do not pursue them. Let them pass like clouds in the sky. Notice that you are the one who is watching the thoughts, not the thought itself. Bring your attention back to your body, back to your breath, and come home to the now. As emanations of the one life, we belong to God. We belong to love. It is what we are made of. And we find it, and we find ourselves in this now moment. Mind serene, heart open, peace itself. And I invite you to go even deeper into that peace as you rest for a moment in the silence. Mind serene, heart open, peace itself. This is what you are. When you are ready, bring your magnificent self back into this time and space, staying in the now. When you are ready, open your beautiful eyes.
Amazing Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a soul like mine. I once was lost, but now I am found. 'Twas blind, but now I see. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've known less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Hallelujah, hallelujah, amen.
Good morning, Unity Church of the Hills. In celebration, and Roderick, thank you so much. He had me at the humming. I can't express adequately how grateful and excited I am to be here to speak with you today. Normally, you all are accustomed to seeing me make announcements regarding church finances or business efforts. And I love that. I love that. That's part of the service work that I get to do to give back to Unity Church of the Hills. It's been such an important part of my life and my family's life for many, many years. In addition to that service work, though, there are other elements that are very important to me that I have a lot of passion about, and that's what I want to speak today in the areas of recovery and unity principle. It occurs to me, though, how fortunate and grateful I am to be here. That grace that was played in Amazing Grace. As Gene talked about in the 8 a.m. service this morning, how did I get here? Others that are on this platform have experienced the same transformation, coming from a place of abject hopelessness and despondency and moved into a place of transformation that we don't recognize ourselves. And so I'm grateful for that. So this upcoming month, September, is Recovery Month. Addiction professionals like to highlight that in the month of September to educate people that there are ways to recover from addiction, mental illness, and live happy, fulfilled, transcendent lives. And I'd like to speak with you today about the tools and perspectives that I have been given over 32 years of active recovery. In the course of that time, I've had the amazing honor, privilege to be able to work with many men in the rooms of recovery on their own personal journeys. And now for over 20 years, I've been a student and practitioner within the New Thought movement. And so the conversation today will be how we integrate those pieces, and we'll move right into the will to recover. So in Unity, we have principles, we also have powers. Charles Fillmore wrote about the 12 powers of man, and August, the power of will, is what's associated with August. I'll also be referencing the 12 steps, which is a basis for recovery that came out of a movement that started in the late 1930s. First, though, I think we need to talk about recovery and what recovery is. It could be defined as a return to normalcy and health. However, those things may not necessarily be synonymous. Health may not be normal, and normal may not be healthy. And that misalignment or maladjustment in between those pieces is where we get to explore the idea of recovery. And this happens on many different planes: physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, both individually and collectively, and as a species. So if we're trying to get to healthy, well, what does healthy look like? Things like being fit, loving, tolerant, patient, kind, understanding. All of those things are things that come to mind when thinking of being a healthy human being. And we have these powers in Unity, these 12 powers, the powers of faith, strength, wisdom, love, power, imagination, understanding, will, order, zeal, release, and life. And to the extent that we engage these powers within the context of our basic Unity principles, we'll live a healthy life. So I'm going to first draw from an anonymous volume that was published in 1939, which is the basis for all 12-step recovery movements that are out there today. The piece has a particular personal significance. One of my mentors in this life, his epitaph is going to be the first few words of this. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are the thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. I remember the first time I actually heard that. I had listened to it being read, I don't know how many times, but the first time I heard that, where I heard that there is this way to combine my will and God's will, the strength, the power, the potential of that was life-changing for me. It took some time to get comfortable with that idea, the magnitude of the potential. And it's certainly something that we exemplify here and we aspire to as a community. And all this comes from our history. And so I'd like to read a piece that Charles wrote in his 12 Powers of Man. It's a few excerpts from starting at page 103. According to some academic metaphysicians, the freedom of will includes the power to act contrary to all of one's own motives, inclinations, or tendencies. I'm going to stop right there and comment on that. I would say that that would be the manifestation of an addiction where we act in direct opposition to the way we want to be, the way we're meant to be, the way our heart sings to be. For everybody that's been exposed to or had to contend with a family member that was struggling with this, or a friend, or even in your own life. We know that those addictions, they can be drinking, eating, taking, addictions to sensation, addictions to suffering. There are innumerable forms. But we have a will, and we get to choose how to align it. So I'm going back into his piece now. This power being inherent in the will, it is readily seen that this thing called motive is another name for understanding, and that it is a necessary adjunct to that faculty. But not all people use understanding as the headlight for both motive and will. The undisciplined mind feels the impulse that lies behind motive and acts without considering either cause or effect. Understanding may be illuminated by the Christ mind and thus receive the light that lighteth every man coming into the world. Without this light, man breaks the law in nearly every act. The divorcement of understanding from will has led to endless controversies between those who have written and debated about the necessity for man's having free will, and those who, because of the evils that have come upon man through ignorant willing, have advocated the utter effacement of the will. We do not need less will, we need more understanding. Fillmore goes on to address the effects of assuming that we have a limited capacity with regard to understanding. He writes, as the executive power of mind, human will is the negative pole of spiritual decision. Right here is where those who study man from a personal viewpoint fail in their estimate of his power and his accountability. As mortal living in the material world, he seems circumscribed and limited in capacity and destiny. Philosophers have studied man in this cage of mind, and their conclusions have been that he is little better than a reasoning animal. But there is a higher and truer estimate of man, and that estimate is made from what the academic school of philosophy would call a purely speculative side of existence. I would say it's probably the mystical life. Failing to discern his spiritual origin, they fail in estimating his real character. As a product of the natural man, will is often a destructive force. It is possible, however, for man so to identify his consciousness with divine mind that he is moved in every thought and act by that mind. Jesus attained this unity when he realized that he was willing not in the personal, but in the divine, when he said, "Not my will, but thine be done." And those references again to Luke and Mark that come from both readings. So how does all this relate to recovery and addiction? Well, we need an informed act of will in order to move from a place where we're suffering from an addiction into a place of recovery. And that is, it is a phased approach. And I'll speak more about that, but it starts with a place of hopelessness. The first thing that we have to do is recognize that there's a problem. And the denial of that problem is something that's very difficult to transcend many times. Anybody who's had a family member or somebody that's struggled with this, being able to hold that vision for them of being able to see and recover from what's going on is something that's very challenging. I've faced that in my own life with the folks that I've worked with, and it's a humbling piece. But we have a power to hold in consciousness the idea of recovery. For the individual, it requires what I call the honest prayer. I reached a point where I was unconditionally willing to move forward. No conditions. So in unity, how does this align with our first and second principles? We have our first principle. There's only one power and one presence in the universe, God, and that power is good. And our second principle is that we are of that. That is our nature. That is our essence. That is what we are created out of and meant to be. And as a result, we do not inherit sickness. How does that align with being addicted? And I think the relationship there, the tie between this, is where we go for power. It is movement from this place of ego, the small self as a source of power, to divine mind, divine source, our true nature as power. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. But before I get into the details, I would like to just provide some context for my story. When I tell my story at a recovery meeting, I kind of talk about it in stages of groups of years. The first 5 years of my life were actually fairly good in many estimations. Not long after I came into recovery, I used to say that I was born and I didn't take it well, but that really wasn't true. I worked pretty well in the context of a small bubble of a nuclear family. And God bless my family. You know, we did have our dysfunctionalities, but that is not what precipitated my addiction. What happened at 5 years old was I went into kindergarten, and that's where I had to start to interact with other human beings outside of that little nuclear family. And my experience was traumatic. I found that I couldn't relate, didn't understand what motivated the other children, was in conflict. I came back home at the end of that first day, I think, and announced very strongly to my parents that I hate school and I'm never going back. And that started a very long period of struggle in my school life. In retrospect, what I discovered is that I experienced for the first time separation from other human beings. And it was excruciating. And so the most difficult years of my life were from 5 to 11. At 11 years old, that's when I took my first drink, and I found relief from that ever-present uncomfortability that comes from feeling separate from not only fellow man, but also from my higher power, my God. I'm not going to go into the activity of my road of addiction, except to say that it was difficult. It was not pretty. It ultimately landed me in a place of hopelessness and despair, homeless, jobless, unable to be present in any sort of intimate relationship in any substantive way, and ultimately culminated at a place where I reached that willingness and was invited into recovery. And that's when I came into this idea of spiritual principle, in this case in the form of 12 steps. And the first one is the admission of that illness that I talked about. And that was based primarily on my understanding my predicament at the time, the physical issues, the manifestations in the temporal world that were forcing me to look at my life. And that springboard of limited understanding was still sufficient for me to move forward. And that second step is that I needed to switch the power source that I was looking to. It didn't come from my self-will. It didn't come from my ego. It came from something else, and I had no understanding of what that was at the time, and that didn't matter. I hit that third step, which is make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of a God that I understand. And that was the starting point. The process of those 12 steps include many tools that are rich and somewhat beyond the scope of my ability to go into in detail in the time that we have here together. I'd love to speak about that at some point in more depth. But there's an inventory process where we go and we look at all the harms that we've done with everybody in our life. And then we get together with another human being and invite God in and sort through that to see what's ours and what's not, and to chart a path on a way of recovery from that, to transcend those challenges. We get to prepare to make amends by reliance on a different power source. And so what that comes from is in the sixth step, we become willing to let go of those things that are hindering us. And we pursue a higher power for that. The eighth step in recovery is to prepare to make amends, and the ninth step is the amends process. And the activities of those righted relationships, those relationships where God's brought back in, transformed my life, transformed all my relationships, transformed the trajectory, and has brought me this amazing, normal, wonderful, full, rich life that I would not have had otherwise. Beyond that are the maintenance steps, I call them, 10, 11, and 12, where we continue to take personal inventory, make amends where we've caused harm, continue to pray and meditate. And there's ties in all of these to powers and principles. We have as our fourth principle prayer and meditation. It's the 11th step. The last step is continuing to live a principled life and carry a message of recovery and help others. That's really so strongly allied with our fifth principle, that we don't just get to know truth, but we get to live it. We get to be that unconditional love. So I'm going to close with a few pieces that are what I call the daily half dozen. These are simple daily activities that I get to do that keep me on that path, that keep me spiritually fed, that are my criteria for a good day regardless of the circumstances. And so I'll run through them here relatively quickly. Out of those 6, the first one, number 1, is pray and meditate. I find a time every day to sit and pray with my wife and then meditate. Read spiritual literature is number 2. Find a way to be fed, to bring in those ideas, those new concepts, whether it's a daily reader and online. There's just so many different ways to be spiritually fed now. Scripture, of course. There's just an innumerable ways to feed ourselves. 3, call another person to solely ask them how they're doing with no other agenda, and then sit and listen with a loving heart. One of my mentors is particularly accomplished at that, and it's amazing how many times he calls at just the right time. 4, stay present, both in my activities, and I use those tools of the 10th step, continuing to take inventory and amends 4 through 9. And we can also do it in the physical plane. Don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. There's your acronym, HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. 5, be of service. Find a way to be of service to someone else. It's an incredible demonstration of faith to know that I am taken care of and I can spend time, attention, energy, resources, power, money, whatever it is, to help someone else. If you want to up-level that, do it and don't get caught. It's not easy. Last, connect with a support group. And here's where Unity Church of the Hills has so many resources available. You know, we can mastermind. We have mastermind groups that you can form and be in. We have spirit circles. We have conscious conversation. We have all of our service teams. And then there are also outside areas. There are all the rooms of recovery out there. There's therapists. My recommendation is shotgun approach. Do it all. So I'd like to close with a vision. When we choose recovery, choose to align our will with God's, do the work necessary to really see what is blocking us off from the sunlight of the Spirit, then we can have that true, meaningful connection with others that I sorely craved as a 5-year-old. Then we can begin to carry God's will into our jobs, our service, and out into the world where it is so needed right now. So my prayer is that my experience, the demonstration of my life, the tools that have been shared with you today, coupled with all the resources of community, knowledge, support, and inspiration and daily practices, as marshaled by your will to recover, will catapult you into another dimension of more rich and fulfilling life. Let's affirm this with a short prayer. If you could, if you feel comfortable, please close your eyes. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to be here, to be with you, to sit in this knowledge of an ever-present, all-love God, omniscient, omnipotent, expanding and expressing through and as us, enabling the transcendence of any difficulty that we may have, had, or will experience in a way that demonstrates the love of God and empowers people to be transformed and to help others in their own personal transformations. I'm so grateful for this activity, this power, this vision, this community, everybody that contributes to it, our volunteers, our loving staff, the rest of the board of trustees, our congregants, everybody that participates in this vision is part of that activity and that force, that presence, that power. And so I let that go into a field of unlimited potential with gratitude, joyousness, and amazing expectancy. Amen. So, now is the time that we get to move into our offering, where we get to support our church, our spiritual community, and practice the law of circulation. Yet another example of that fifth principle that we get to practice. As a member of the board, I get to see the financials and how all of our church operations are going on a regular basis. And I can say that right now, we are treading water. We are operable, and we will continue to be so in our present circumstance for a limited time. And we will need to up our game. We know that we don't rely on our own source. We rely on unlimited potential. And so the board, the staff, everybody here knows that absolutely everything that's necessary is being provided in right time. And so with that consciousness, I invite everybody to do what is theirs to do. And I'm so grateful. So we have a number of different ways to give. And they're going to show up on your screen. There they are. You can use our app. You can text to give. You can go online or by mail. And we're so grateful for the generosity and the support and the love of our community. And we know that when we put things out there into the universe from that place of love, from that place of generosity, we receive in much greater measure. So let's speak our offering affirmation together. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I circulate, and I am grateful.
Changing, looking out the window, got me wondering lately, will we be okay? Will we be okay? One day I can feel the sun shining, Next day a bullet can leave a mama crying. Will she be okay? Tell me, will she be okay? Life has taken everything that I have just to survive. I've got $25 in my pocket, and I think another 10 in my glove compartment. I'm trying so bad not to cry, but it's hard to stop it. But you say all of my needs, you promise you got it. So I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay. Okay, okay. See, I gotta remember that my God is bigger than any challenge I'll ever face. So I'm gonna be okay. Why do we hate one another? When love is the most beautiful color, it takes away the gray and makes everything okay. Where is the American dream? If only 1% knows what it means to really be okay. Tell me, is that okay? Life has taken everything that I had just to survive. I've got $25 in my pocket, and I think another 10 in my glove compartment. I'm trying so bad not to cry, but it's hard to stop it. But you say all of my needs, you promise you got it. So I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay. Okay, okay. See, I gotta remember that my God is bigger than any challenge I'll ever face. So I'm gonna be okay. See, our God is great. The season of pain, it won't last always. Life has taken everything that I have just to survive. You've got $25 in your pocket, and you think another 10 in your glove compartment. But that family with no food would trade places with you. Give thanks and don't forget how you've got it, and you gon' be okay. We gon' be okay. Okay, okay. See, I gotta remember that my God is bigger than any challenge I'll ever face. So I'm gonna be okay. We gon' be okay, and you gon' be okay. I'm gonna be okay, so I'm gonna be okay.
Well, welcome back. Thank you again, Celebration. Please join us afterwards for our Going Deeper session, where we can engage in some conversation around the topic today of unity principle, powers, and the 12 steps. Let's speak our prayer for protection together. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.
Thank you for your message today. If you guys have a question for Frank, go ahead and type it in the comments on Facebook. And while we're waiting for all of you guys, I had a question for you, Frank. So is there a difference between being in recovery and being recovered? Do you see a distinction there?
Yes, absolutely I do. And it's something that in the rooms of recovery has been bantered around a lot over the years about whether someone is recovered or in recovery. And the distinction, I believe, has to do with our present state.
Okay.
In the moment. In literature, it describes being recovered as no longer being in a place of hopelessness with regard to mind and body. And transcendence of our addictions, when they've truly happened, we're no longer in that hopeless state anymore. And so at that point, I've recovered from that condition. The ones I'm aware of.
Right, right.
So the ones that I am not aware of that are still out there, yet to be addressed, those are the ones that I'm actively involved in the recovery with.
Okay. And I heard you mention like recovery from suffering, sensation. So those are different than kind of the way I think most people think about recovery is, you know, I have an addiction to drinking or to drugs or to work. But so you're talking about a broader level of addiction that I would say everyone kind of to some degree has something that they're addicted to. I mean, what would you say about that?
Well, I would say look at your phone and see how much time you spend with it. There are so many manifestations of that separation, that fundamental false idea that we are not completely part of and aligned with our Creator, and that we don't possess all access to all of that's available. Yeah. The Christ potential is within each of us at its full potential at this very given moment.
Right.
And anything that's holding me back from that is something that I need to look at, because usually it's a distraction of some sort, which is another form of an addiction.
Yeah, Hawkins, I think, used the term attachments and aversions.
Aversions, yeah.
So I've got a question here. So what are some ways we can determine if we or a loved one actually has a problem and that they aren't in denial? So yeah, like how do we, especially if you're the one suffering from it, how do you?
That is a very delicate matter. And it is one that I know that there is no singular right approach. There's something in rooms of recovery they call a 12-step call, where you get a call from maybe a family member or somebody who cares about someone and says, hey, this person is really in a bad way. Can you come and help somehow? Can you show them, what you did to recover? And that those initial approaches are we really have to be present in those and go, is it our time to really engage or simply put an invitation forward? And it's a difficult thing. And so I think the answer to that question is make sure our own house is in order. And so there are groups that are specifically designed for family members.
Right.
And I can put forward that there's a repository of information that I assembled that the church office, you can call Jennifer here at 335-4449. That's area code 512-335-4449. And get access to those groups to help in how do I approach this? How do I address it? Because timing needs to be right.
Yeah.
And the approach needs to be right. And usually the thing that's so difficult is the family members typically are not the ones that are able to do it. There's too much.
Yeah, there's too much in the mix about it.
Yes, and so inviting in that third party that's neutral, there's magic in that piece.
Beautiful, yes. So there are a list of recovery resources that Jennifer has at the front office. And thank you for providing those. I've got another question for you. So how can we use, in your opinion, the 12 steps and unity principles and powers to help us in the recovery of the present cultural climate? So I remember a talk a while ago, Mary Bolin had typed in, it sounds like what's going on is that we all need a 12-step program. So anyways, I think that question kind of alludes to that. Do you have any thoughts around that?
So many. I will try and keep it concise. One of the things is we honor all paths. The 12-step approaches are not the only approach. It's the one that I've engaged with on multiple levels and has been extremely transformative in my life. But the topic that you bring up is so pertinent, so relevant to these times. As a matter of fact, Joni and I were talking about it just before the service. This idea of...
It was her question.
Oh. There you have it.
There you go.
And I love it because it is the work. The unity movement came forward as a healing and an educational movement.
Yeah.
Not as a social justice movement.
Right.
But these times where we are now experiencing the calling forth of those diseases. You can call them racism, you can call them tribalism, you can call them greed. They're innumerable manifestations of separation. And so acting collectively, what is ours to do? And I can tell you the board is actively engaged in this conversation on a regular basis. And as we go through the new minister search, and I don't want to get too much into that business, but to let you know that we're conscious of this as the leadership of the community. And what I can say is, and to some degree, it's the same experience as approaching someone who's struggling from the ravages of alcoholism.
Right.
That moment of clarity is something that they need to discover. And we can hold in our consciousness the solution, the vision, and we can actively engage in efforts that fall well outside of our local activity that help promote that healing and that expression of unconditional love. And it all starts with, though, my consciousness.
Right.
It starts in here and in here, in that alignment, that definition of healing where mind and heart are in perfect alignment.
Yeah.
Because if I don't bring that to the game, my efforts are going to cause even more difficulty. Like the reading from Fillmore, that all our actions, even our best intentioned ones, can act in direct opposition to our intention. It's an amazing thing. And so constantly going back again and again and again. I'll close with this little piece around that. There's nothing God's power can't transcend. And so even with our best intentions, we start an activity that is bent for good and somehow seems to terminate disastrously. If we continue to bring God into that, it will be transcended. And if we choose to, we can leverage that towards good, towards helping somebody else. Well, yeah, I tried this and it so didn't work, so we'll do it this way, and so that experience, that profound value in life of experience is such a big thing that we can bring the power of God into and then use it in some way that's transformative. With God, all things are possible.
Absolutely.
It's just a timing issue.
Absolutely, yes it is. Well, and you spoke at length in your message about switching the power source, so that was beautiful and a key component to it, right? It's like we've got to learn how to do that. So I've got another question here. Do you think, so the question from Courtney here is recovery possible if someone doesn't acknowledge an addiction?
I could say that, well, it depends to some extent the ultimate definition of recovery. Because I've known people that have fully comprehended and understood the depth and nature of their addiction and haven't been able to recover from it, and here's the caveat, in this lifetime.
Right.
Ultimately, there's always recovery.
Absolutely.
So the chances are greatly improved if somebody is willing to acknowledge it.
Right.
However, even an acknowledgement doesn't always necessarily mean that folks are going to follow through. The hardest thing about recovery is continuing to do the things that work. It's the practice, that daily half dozen that I talk about, falling back on those tools on it. And we don't have to be perfect about it. We can be very human in the implementation of spiritual tools and still lead amazing lives.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, and you said somewhere in your talk about the denial of the problem is so hard to transcend. And so I guess that really is critical to acknowledge the problem, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. There's a lot of mystery around the prerequisites for that moment of clarity. Like what needs to transpire to see the light. And frequently, it's external circumstances being unmanageable. DWIs, getting arrested, losing your family, losing your health.
Yeah.
But it's also an internal piece where there's an inward crisis of losing all faith in any of the tools that we have had available to us in our coping. One of the seminal places for me in my path of that moment of clarity was when the things that I was doing stopped working.
Right.
And that's when life became truly terrifying. I was in my early 20s, and I was afraid of living either in my active addiction or outside of it.
Right.
And that's when I became desperate.
Do you think that it seems so often that, a bottom, right, is necessary, or that you have to reach that point? I just wonder, is it necessary? I know people ask that all the time, but I mean, it's sort of, what are your thoughts there?
Yes. Well, there needs to be that moment where we get to abandon ourselves to something new, where we let go of some old idea at a profound level. And so, yes, I do believe there needs to be a dark night of the soul in some form or fashion. But we can get off the elevator wherever we want. That's the thing that's fascinating, is that it's not necessary to descend into abject depravity. Yeah, we don't have to go there. There are plenty of good demonstrations that can be in our future. In the rooms of recovery, they call it the yets. You're eligible too. Okay. And so if you're on that path and you go into recovery, you will always hear stories that are much worse, where people have gone to levels that are unimaginable, inhuman. It is phenomenal. And been able to be transcended and have amazing lives. Yeah.
Awesome. One of the things that, to me, it seems like is very synonymous between recovery, 12-step groups, and unity is that just unconditional love and acceptance, right? Because I think in most recovery groups, it doesn't matter where you're at, you're just accepted. So I don't know that there's a question in
Well,
there.
there's something I would love to speak to there.
Absolutely.
No, that question or that idea resonates so strongly with me, because it is a receptivity. I mean, we think about someone who is in the ravages of their disease, and my own experience, when I walked into the rooms of recovery, I had burned down my life.
Right.
And the people in those rooms said, "We're so glad you're here. Keep coming back."
Yeah.
We get to do that here at Unity Church of the Hills. Anybody who walks through the front door, "We're so glad you're here. Please keep coming back."
Right. Yeah, that's so beautiful. All right, so I don't see any more questions coming in. Lots of y'all are hanging on, but maybe we've gotten, oh wait, one more question. What is the importance of making amends? That's a good question.
Okay. It's critical. One of my favorite authors in this lifetime is Emmett Fox.
Yeah.
And Emmett Fox talks about the demonstration, which is the demonstration that results from prayer and acting in accordance with spiritual principle. And within the context of the 12th step, that 9th step, that making amends, that making things right, culminates in an experience, and there's this series of promises that are associated with it. You know, we will know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will lose our fear of financial insecurity. There's a whole battery of blessings that come from that. And from my own experience, that's when I first started to see the demonstration of working in a way that I had never done before. I went to everybody that I had harmed and made restitution. Family members, bosses, friends. And what happened out of that, I don't have time for the full story, but it enabled me to go back to school, to have a career, to have a life that I couldn't have imagined, and to say that my relationships with my family are the best that they can possibly be, because there's no baggage. We won't regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. That's one of those promises. That's so powerful.
Yeah.
It is a peace that allows us.
Will you say that again?
We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it.
Wow, that is powerful.
That alone, that one promise, I know has moved people into that process of recovery. If I can get that one thing. And when we are in that place, we are no longer consigned to live a life where we have a past that we're dragging with us, that's weighing us down. As a matter of fact, instead, what we have is a series of demonstration of God's love and God's power by acting in alignment with that.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you. So, Carrie, I saw a comment that you had a question. I'm hoping this is the question. I think it was answered from your fellow Facebookers, but we'll go back and just make sure. So, Carrie asked, what was the word that you mentioned that summarized number 4, stay present, and had 5 needs starting with hunger? So I think it's HALT is what you're asking for,
yes,
Carrie.
the acronym?
So will you go over that? And
so,
if, Carrie, I didn't get your question, type it in again, please.
Okay. So yes, the acronym HALT. It is hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And to think about that in terms of somebody who's active in an addiction, who's been up for several days, or out cold for a while, or whatever the case may be, eating breakfast may not be on the regular agenda. And so just paying attention to what's going on with our body, making sure that we get sufficient rest. If we're disturbed, pay attention to that and ask ourselves, what can I do about this?
Right.
And the big one is the lonely piece. Yeah. It is, they call it the 10,000-pound telephone. Everybody should be just pumped, because if that phone weighs 10,000 pounds to pick up your cell phone and call someone, but we that's part of that willingness that needs to happen out of that unconditional desire to be in recovery, is to pick up the phone and call and connect with somebody else. We don't do it alone. And it is the thing that begins that process of eliminating the separation.
Right.
To reach out and call someone else and ask for help.
That explains why it's part of your 6 half-dozen things to do, is that you reach out.
And that piece, though, is the transcended version, if you will, in that I'm not asking for help. I'm calling them to see how they're doing.
You're helping make sure no one else is out there lonely.
Precisely, yes.
Yeah, which is just so beautiful.
Yes.
So,
and so I've been shifted from that place of early in recovery of being desperate and calling people up and going, oh my God, I'm going out of mine. How do you do this? To this place of I get to call another human being and go, how you doing today, Tammy?
Yeah, it's beautiful. I just have to mention, because I just think it's great, your son is watching, and he says, thank you for your talk today. So thanks, James, for tuning in. That's beautiful. So let me see if we have any other questions in here. I'm not seeing any more, so I guess, do you have any closing comments or thoughts that you want to share with all of us?
Well, yes, I would like to. I was unaware my son was
Yeah.
on the piece, and that's a blessing of recovery for me. I am so grateful. My children were brought up in a home that operated out of spiritual principle, first starting with the steps, and then we got to bring them into Unity Church of the Hills, and they grew up in this community, have some lifelong friends as a result of that, and I'm so grateful for that. So I guess I would like to close just by saying, if you think you have a problem, or if you know someone who has a problem, reach out. Reach out. We have a chaplaincy here. We have those resources that we talked about. We have all the groups that I mentioned. The help is there. The connection places are there. The resources are there. And it's available. And it will be provided for free and for fun. And so I invite anybody that's struggling to reach out and connect.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, all of you, for being here today. This is community right now, and we're grateful for each and every one of you, and just have a very blessed Sunday. We love you.